builds the Corn Building, Moses Corn. 1 year later, the Great Fire burned everything to the ground. Oh, great. 1 year after it's burned to the ground, he rebuilt just that. 2 months later, he rebuilt it, the same exact building, used the same plans, but there's a guitar shop up there. There's another building here. I'll show you where we are so we'll understand later. Here's the sidewalk. We walked across. We were standing here pointing toward those buildings, and we went through that door, down some stairs, and now these windows are where? Over there. See, you can see us in there. Ah, a giant hand! It's my virtual reality. I don't even know regular reality. Okay, here's the hill. Came down here, filled this in. Why do we not see out there dirt up against? Why did they just put the hill right up against the base of the building? Because it's structurally unsound. They wanted to continue also to use this area around here, so they came out to the edge of the sidewalk when they raised the streets and built these thick retaining walls first, and then they channeled the dirt into there and raised the streets, then connected the sidewalks to the buildings, and I'll repeat this in excruciating detail later. But when did they put the sidewalks in? Some places immediately, but in some places it was 3 years before they decided who would pay for it. There was a standoff between the merchants and the city. There were no sidewalks. There was just a sidewalk, street, sidewalk. Is that hard to cross the street? Yes, we're talking about it. And people died. Is that a northern exposure? Wait. Oh, no, that's Seattle. I'm sorry. This is before the fire. This is why they called it the Great Fire. Because they were going, great, it's on fire, yay. Okay, doesn't look too good. And a lot of you, I think almost everyone here probably has some preconceptions that are going to confuse you, that they built after the fire, they built on top or something like that. No, just forget that. What they did was they had the chance after the fire to rebuild, to regrade the land first and then build, but they blew it. They built the buildings and they said, we're going to regrade later. We want to do business now. We'll regrade as time and money allows. That means these buildings, after they burned down, went up at the same level on the same foundations, but they were 3 to 7 stories high, and they were only brick, stone, and steel. Mostly, the city council, the day after the fire, passed a law that all the new buildings built had to be at least 80% brick wide. No, because 2 members of the city council own the biggest brickyard in the region. See, there's a trend developing here. Okay. After this all burned down, they rebuilt and then raised the streets later. But this looks different, right? This isn't Pioneer Square today, but I mean, this isn't what it looks like. But you'll certainly recognize the University of Washington. Okay, who's been there? Anybody? It's really, I do recommend if you're in town, that is a place. You got to go there. They've got a great neighborhood near there. And also the cherry blossoms. Right now, you're very lucky because the cherry blossoms in the quad are exploding into bloom very short period of time. So, oh, too bad, it's over. No, no I've seen a lot of campuses, and architecturally, that's one of, my husband's looking for a job. He finally finished his PhD in American literature. Oh. We're teaching him how to say, would you like fries with that? All right. This is actually, Walla Walla, Washington has a state penitentiary today, the state prison, but originally they were offered by the state a choice of a college campus or a prison, and they actually chose the prison. I guess they didn't want the bad element that a university brings to a city. Okay, afterward, nothing was left, just a couple of brick walls, and these hardy pioneers were standing there. No, these were left. Not just from the heat of the fire, they left the electricity on to prove how safe it was, which is stupid. They had to replace them right here, and at great expense. So they cut costs by leaving them if they weren't too bad. So as a result, for many years in some places, they ran like a roller coaster, but they ran. No one died during the fire. They fricasseed 1 million rats, but they didn't kill any people. 2 days after the fire, someone died. They're standing under one of these walls. The wall fell down on them and killed them, but other than that, total devastation of their property, but no one died. So it's a tragedy, but compare our tragedy to what happened back east only 6 days earlier. Pennsylvania? Anybody? Water? Johnstown flood, right. Hey, do you know what goes clop, clop, bang, bang, clop, clop, bang, bang? An Amish drive-by shooting. Yeah. Sorry. For those of you not laughing, thanks for your compassion. All right. And your consistency, too. All right, come on over here. And at the time of the fire, they said, they opened the vault and they said, there's $1,000. Should we still send this all to Johnstown or keep some of it? And actually, it was the good old days. They kept none of it. They sent every penny to Johnstown. That's so beautiful. Once again, thanks for your compassion. Come here, you sensitive people. Come here. You like this audience participation part. What's your name? Leah, can you tell me, how is this different than the one at home? Bless you. Welcome to the underground. I had a kid on the tour once later in the museum. I said, did you learn anything on the tour? She said, yes, I am allergic to mold. Okay, I'm sorry. What? It's rusty. What else? It's off. I usually just ask the whole group, and I stopped doing that last year. I would say, how is this different than the one at home? Usually someone says it's cleaner, that's funny, but one time this woman in the back looks at her husband, she goes, well, the seat's down. And then we were talking in the museum, she goes, do you know how many men it takes to change a roll of toilet paper? I said, no. She goes, nobody knows, it's never been done. I said, ma'am, that's sexist, I could never repeat that. Okay. Anyway, and that's off. You can see the tank's way up there. We call this the cistern chapel. People genuinely that was a pipe that connected it to the toilet bowl. It's off the ground though. Why? Because that reverse flush would create a turbo bidet, a power bidet, or a refreshing feeling, whatever. And that means now, I want everyone to understand this. Seattle, remembers, on a mud flat, that pipe's covered up, it's like a straw. If you're two people blowing on each end, there's a lot of pressure, and a pinhole will create, in this case, it was water, raw sewage and salt water. So if you have it blasting 6 feet out of the bowl, you get the bowl up higher, it'll still be around that explosion. This means toward the waterfront. Sometimes in Old Seattle, you'll see pictures of the Old Seattle waterfront where these outhouses are off the ground 19 feet, and there's a ladder, and because it has to be higher. It's lower. Yeah, you got your Sears catalog. It makes a stunning skyline. Now, did Janelle tell you about our women, what they were doing here? She did? No, she did? Okay. The group, that a group of men were sent down there. Among them, a young English immigrant named Hugh Grant. Anyway, she told you about the women. Our big industry, flat on its back, etc. Speaking of back taxes, okay, up on the wall, see the decoration there? There are two kinds of decoration they used commonly. Now the bottom part, that's the square part, is a frame for a big mirror that was here, but that's a different, anybody know how they did that? What technique that is? Come on, Martha Stewart, where are you? Stucco stenciling, right? Stucco stenciling's at the bottom. At the top, those are done with decals on wet plaster. That was really common because Victorian motif was awfully ornate, so if you did it all by hand, it would take too much time. Do you guys know what decals are? You know, like a fake tattoo in your cereal box. Hey, are you guys going to get tattoos while you're here in Seattle, kids? It's a capital. No? She goes, no, because you just want to be different. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, those are done very common, but why do we see too many examples? Because usually someone paints over it with something nice, like a big orange daisy, or whatever's the new mode of the day. So we lose a lot of stuff because of the new taste. When we go down this street, actually we're not going onto the street because it's up here, it's up high on these retaining walls. We're going to go travel down the sidewalk. So follow me down here. We're going to go down to the undergarment district while those were being sown. Did you hear that the Florida Orange Juice Growers Association just offered OJ $4 million to change his name to Snapple? Because remember, they asked Cato Kalin one more time, they said, what were you doing between 9 and 12? And he said, 3rd grade. Okay, wait, what grade are you in? 2nd? What? 7th? And you're kindergarten. And you just graduated from college. Are you doing graduate school? Okay, that's what I thought.
I'm not 10-year-old who graduated from college.
No.
Yeah. 11.
Really? No. You're pulling my leg. Oh. Hi, come and join the conversation here. No, wait, actually, you guys, unfortunately, we're not supposed to have any feet on these stairs. I know it's dumb, it's our insurance guy. But when we're done, we're going to walk down there. We can't start till everyone gets here because then they always say, could you repeat that? Hey, did you hear about the 3-legged dog? He goes into a bar, he says, I'm looking for the guy who shot my paw. Too bad, huh? Do you know why the skeleton couldn't cross the road? Didn't have any guts, right. Thank you. Hurry, you're subjecting these people to bad jokes. Okay. How did the fire start? Anybody know?
Did you do it on purpose?
No, it was not. No federal funding was involved. Yes?
Glue
A glue pot. Thank you. Actually, a lot of people say a cow. The people from Chicago think there's this pyromaniac cow that wandered the country. No, bad cow. They should send all the cows to Bosnia and let them set off the mines.
Or how about England?
No, well, they're in it. Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. What I was going to say is the floor in a carpentry and paint shop is covered with sawdust soaked in turpentine. So when these burning bits of glue hit the floor, that's not a known fire retardant, right? It spread pretty quickly. And on either side was a hardware store. And well, one side was a hardware store, the other was a saloon. The saloon had just received their month's shipment of whiskey. All those barrels were parked up against that common wall. So when it caught fire, all that alcohol exploded. On the other side, though, was worse, a hardware store. Back then, what would you buy in a hardware store that would be flammable or explosive?
Yes.
Gasoline, kerosene, ammunition, coal, oil, any kind of fuel, kindling, anything that paraffin, anything that could burn or explode. One of the volunteer firefighters kept a journal for the chief that said, "Could not fight the fire here, sir. It was shooting back at us." So that's a problem. They also went to the boardwalk. The boardwalk couldn't reach it with the hoses because it was too far away. And so they tried to put it out by tearing up the burning planks and throwing those over the cliff into Elliott Bay, where they bobbed around on fire for a while before drifting back onto the piers, catching pier after pier after pier on fire. They also tried a fire break. You've heard of blowing up a group of buildings or trees in the path of a fire. Normally more effective if the building isn't on fire. Yeah, unfortunately their timing was a little off. They said, uh-oh, it's not blowing up. 25 minutes later, when that fire reached that building, kaboom, burning timbers blew several blocks in every direction. Anyway, finally, not to worry, they did succeed using a variety of these techniques after 12 hours in burning down the entire city. Which is good. That's what they wanted. They didn't know it's a subconscious need. And they met the next day in this big meeting. They cranked out handbills that said, "Open air meeting." I love that. And they said, "What do you guys want to do?" "Ooh, we hate Profanity Hill, so let's just sluice that down." "Hey, let's use the top of that hill. We'll sluice it down into the lower part, evening it out." Remember? Because we had drowning children in the streets and exploding toilets, and one of those things is disconcerting. I'm kidding, both things. And they said, "Well, let's do this. Let's talk to the engineers. We're going to tell them to regrade, and then we'll be able to make our money." And they said, "Great." The engineers said, "Come back in 10 years. That's how long it'll take." And so they said, "Well, we're thinking of noon today or 4 at the latest. So I guess that's out. We're going to stick with Seattle tradition, which is to build another city that really sucks, right? So that's our motto here. Even if it's a rotten idea, you just stick with it. You know about the Kingdome and the Seahawks, right? Okay. Well, this is what they did. They did it. They had a chance to do it right, and they didn't. That's why we have an underground. But they did know that they were going to regrade, so they built first. Instead of regrading and building, they built first to make money, regraded around in between like a big waffle. But they put the entrances that they were going to have permanently, those fancy archways, they put those on the second floor of the buildings, or sometimes the third. And this is how they raise the streets. Okay, it's the technical part. Now, you guys think of a sandwich or an Oreo cookie, right? You got 2 layers with a filling. These are 2 retaining walls that are about 8 or 9 feet thick, and they're filled in, not with hydrogenated lard and sugar. That's in an Oreo. Is that gross? And they filled it in with stuff from the hill, mud, rocks, everything, rowboats, horses, carriages. They found maybe an in-law bad neighbor. Anything you want to get rid of forever, you'd throw in the fill. And then they paved the top. That's the street. But right before they paved the top, they put those water, sewage, and drainage lines just up under the surface of the street. So now the whole city is connected to this elevated system which can now travel down, not be covered up with the incoming tide. And all your problems are over forever? No, they were just beginning in some places. Remember, in this place, here on Occidental, and by the way, we're going to go down here in a second, the end of there, that was the Fry meat packing plant. That's the only legitimate meat market on this street. This was mostly saloons and hotels. Not a good time for the drunk or the clumsy. This is where we get the term shop till you drop, actually. Because remember, you have a street, a sidewalk, and entrances. We call it John Travolta syndrome. Yeah. There's still some of the tin. Actually, they like to use copper. That's better acoustically, but I'm sure it's more expensive. So this is tin. That's just flat, but up here you'll still see a couple pieces left of the pressed tin. And remember, Victorians' main goal in life was to cover the entire surface of the planet with decoration, including the ceiling where you wouldn't even look unless you're a baby or a seamstress or something, I guess. Okay, now up here, you'd see a dancing gal, scantily clad, maybe an exposed ankle or something shocking, huh? And then along the walls in every booth would sit a logger. All they had to do was push a button to get a drink because a waitress at the bar would see a flashing light or hear a buzzer, and she'd know to come to that booth and they'd need help. Why was it called a box house theater? Because every booth had a curtain or a sliding door, and that way you could have a private moment with that waitress regarding her service, and perhaps have a button sewn on, or something taken in or out, or both. Yeah. Anyway, that's Occidental Avenue. We're going to go up into a city alley, so get a big breath of fresh air while you're down here. Also, if you have a camera, this is a good photo op. So. Hey, do you know what happened to the... Oh, never mind. waiting for the, usually it's a husband, yes, and they're waiting for the right moment to tickle their wife's ankle and say, is that a rat I hear? They think it's hilarious. Yeah, they think it's real funny until they get home. Okay. Hey, it's a Ken Burns documentary. It's just like PBS, huh? Except there's no poignant fiddle music, so you have to imagine that. Where would we be if we were in this photograph? Dead, just like now, right? No, right here. Here where the ghostly images. Ooh, okay, we're down here now. This is the original street level. Incidentally, I believe another shot was fired from here behind the grassy knoll. Oh wait, that's another one. Okay. Sorry. Sing if you're listening. Okay, this all burned down. Can I get a moment of sirens? Okay. Come on. Thank you, kids. No, I need. Thanks for being interactive. Sometimes, anybody here speak in front of people for a living? Yeah, it's kind of, sometimes it's like talking to an oil painting for an hour. So I had one group, it's kind of funny, I was just thinking that, I think it was last year I started crying toward the end because they were so excruciatingly quiet, and this, the whole group was like this with this one woman. Finally I said, those are the Springer sewing machines, and she goes, it's Singer. That's a really long tour. You have a picture? We don't. Okay, anyway, thank you, Canada. Canada. Hey, how many Canadians here today? You sure? How many? Come on. Okay, yeah, they're shy. You have to. I have one at home. I know, they're very shy. But polite. Thank you for being polite. Yeah. How many Canadians can you get into a Volkswagen? 4. 2 in the front, 2 in the back. No pushing. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, how many Canadians how do you get 25 Canadians out of a swimming pool? You say, pardon me, would you please get out of the pool? Great, yeah. But they were very nice to us. During the gold rush, they put up with, they just have had enough with the U.S., just like you did. And they said, hey, you guys, you're causing a lot of problems for Canada. Come on. 100,000 Americans have gone through Seattle, across the Canadian border, because they were recovering here in the U.S. at the time that they discovered there was an economic, they were recovering from an economic depression. They heard there was gold in the Klondike, the Yukon, so they went through Canadian territory where they more often than not dropped like flies all over the place, because they never brought enough stuff with them. On the mossy side of it. There's a chia wall. You can use that as a guide. Chia. As a Christmas gift, of course. Okay, come on in here. And last person in line back there, light monitor. You want to hit the red button. I want to show everybody how much. Thank you. Oh, wait, not the red button. I'm kidding. All right. Then we are diagonally kitty corner across the intersection from the pergola, okay? Just so you know. When we go out of here, actually, I have to lock the door from the outside. That means I can't leave until the last person goes ahead of me. And you're all going to meet me on top of the skylight up here. So I'll reiterate, but anyway. Think about why this glass is purple. Anybody know? In the meantime, though, we're waiting for somebody. I thought it'd be fun. It's Saturday, right? We can stop people usually by yelling help really loud. No? Well, it's fun. Usually they'll kind of slow down and circle a little bit. We used to just do that with little kids. We have some fabulous listeners here today, but sometimes during the tour we need to let them scream just to get it off there. Then we realized a lot of you are staying with relatives while you're here, so you need to scream too. Oh, shoot. Oh, you got some? Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay, we'll do one practice. 1, 2, 3. Oh! That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Then we'll do it 3 times. Oh! Oh! Scared him away. No, that's fun. Wait, we're gonna call a moratorium. We're gonna stop doing that. That's a big word, isn't it? We'll try that before we leave, kids. But let's talk for a second, and then I was gonna say usually nobody stops during the week. So on the weekend we do have more success because the people around here in the week, these offices are now filled with professionals, and they're not curious about the architects and lawyers and. Actually, yeah, sometimes the lawyer will stop and push their card through at the end. One time we did have a group of second graders down here. Cocktail hour here is dawn or whatever, lush hour here in Pioneer. Oh, the bank? This is the old bank entrance. This was owned by Jacob Firth, but it wasn't called Firth We're gonna cross the street. Jim and I work so hard to try and entertain you with our own personalities, unique. Well, there are 14 personalities between the four guys, actually. And they also, anyway, I was going to say there's a tip jar. I hate mentioning that, though. I never mention, I think about mentioning to make the world a better place for you and your grandchildren. That would be a pathetic ploy, so I'm not even going to mention the jar at the end of the counter with the rat on top before the last story gets you through the museum. Instead of mentioning the tip jar, I'll just say, have a good vacation. We're saving ourselves to go to Tacoma. So. I know it's not that far, but it's